Thank you for tuning in tonight. We're going to get started here in just a few minutes. Let folks hop on and join us for this evening. Hope you've been having a good summer and staying cool. It's not very nice out, to say the least, in terms of temperature. But thank you for tuning in. We'll get started here in just a few minutes, letting folks kind of hop on and have some time to join us this evening. But we're going to be making some really good, just in time for the 4th of July treats. The flag pizza that a lot of folks enjoy and have as a kind of dish for the 4th of July, something easy to make and tasty, and also kind of good for this weather time period too, with how hot it is outside. But we'll give folks a few more minutes to hop on and to join us. But thank you for tuning in this evening. We're going to talk about the budget that we just passed, the state operating budget that was just completed. Feel free, I've got the ingredients and the instructions and everything in the post, but feel free to comment and to share if you've got questions, or if you kind of make this is really easy.
Very easy, but many different ways to make it too.
Lots of variations, lots of different ways to do it. But thank you for tuning in this evening. So all the ingredients and the instructions are there in the post as well. Don't have a lot for you in the post in terms of the actual budget, what we just passed this past Wednesday. I'll be kind of releasing things all throughout the summer of what was in the budget and kind of what that process is like in terms of policy moving forward. But obviously a lot there, a lot that we went through over the past 6 months to get to the budget. It is the most important thing that we as legislators do, is pass that operating budget. So, Mom, kind of what do we have here that we're making for this flag 4th of July pizza?
Yep. So we had to start with the sugar cookie. We baked it, just the log of sugar cookie. And
just one big sugar cookie?
Yep.
Okay.
From the refrigerator section, we just cut it open, let it get a little soft, and then you just pat it in there and baked it and let it cool. And then we have to mix up some cream cheese. You want to grab that? Well, I think I could grab it.
She's a little short.
Just a little short.
So what are all the ingredients?
Yeah, so we have 8 ounces of cream cheese that we have to mix in here, along with 1/3 cup of powdered sugar, and then a teaspoon of vanilla. And just a little shout out to, I'm drawing a blank now. Thank you, Stephanie Piley, I think is her name. Piles. She had made this and sent it to me. It's really, really, really good. Organic vanilla. But we mix up the cream cheese once it's soft, which we've had it sitting out for a little bit. And then we'll put in the powdered sugar and the vanilla, spread it on the cookie that's in the pan. And then you just layer your strawberries.
And then kind of organize. And this one doesn't call for bananas, but I've seen ones with bananas as well.
You can put bananas on it. And actually, I forgot, once you mix the cream cheese and powdered sugar, you fold in the Cool Whip.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a little bit of instructions that we're going to go through, but really an easy recipe, something everyone enjoys. This is something I like to get 4th of July parties, because it's a nice little light dessert, especially if it's warm outside and all of that. So on the budget side, we obviously just passed the state operating budget last Wednesday. That's the culmination of about 6 months of work between the House and the Senate. House passes our version. We passed it back in April. The Senate passed their version early part of June. And then essentially we kind of come together. There's leadership on both sides of the legislature, and they'll decide ultimately what's in the final budget. And then we voted on that this past Wednesday. So that's the powdered sugar?
Powdered sugar and the cream cheese, and just got to get it mixed up. So when you say leadership that kind of joins together.
Who is that?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's like essentially the finance chairs, vice chairs on both sides. That's the committee that actually does the budget. They'll get together through conference committee, is what we call it, where they negotiate back and forth. There's a lot of differences between the House and the Senate budget, so they have to agree on where those differences going to ultimately fall. It's a $60 billion budget. It's a lot of money. We do a lot of programs, obviously, at the state. The biggest expenses, half the budget is Medicaid, which is kind of crazy to think about. Half the budget is Medicaid. About 1/3 of the budget is public education. And then about 1/4 of the budget is public safety. So like our state prison system, those types of things. And then the rest of the budget, like about 1/6 of the budget or so, is everything else.
Wow.
So we always joke we medicate, we educate, and we incarcerate. That's kind of the big three things the state of Ohio does. The transportation budget, that's a separate budget that we passed earlier this year. That's all of our gas tax money. That was about $15 billion or so. And that does all of our highways, our transportation, airports, all of those things.
And what were there, like 5,000 items in the budget?
Well, it's about 5,000 pages. It's a big document. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have the cream cheese, we have the powdered sugar, and then what?
Cool Whip. So the Cool Whip you actually have to fold in because you don't want to break it up. You want it to just kind of be blended. But let's see if we can get the rest of this cream cheese off of here.
Okay. So making that together, this is kind of like the base level for your 4th of July pizza. Yeah. So in the budget, obviously a lot of spending priorities. Like I said, with Medicaid being half of our budget, that's really dictated by the federal government. A lot in the Medicaid budget, that's all of your medical insurance for poor folks, for kids with disabilities, for people who are on disability. I'm still learning a lot about the Medicaid budget because that's not my area, but we cut back the Medicaid budget. We essentially also asked and kind of did a resolution, demanded the federal government allow us to put work requirements into the Medicaid side. So if you're able-bodied and can work, you should be working to get Medicaid. I think it's a pretty safe statement. And then about 10 years ago, Ohio expanded Medicaid quite a bit. If you look at our spending curves, where we're spending a lot more versus 10 years ago in the state budget, it's public education. We'll get to that in a second. And then it's largely Medicaid and how much Medicaid has grown. With that being half of our budget, we really have to tamp down that side of it because the spending will just be out of control. So we actually cut the Medicaid total spending a couple percentages and essentially asked the federal government stops covering or paying for the expanded Medicaid coverage that Governor Kasich had instituted about 10 years ago, then we will not be on the hook for that either, is what we've essentially all agreed to. So that was a big piece of Medicaid, a lot there that kind of still diving into. Public education, that's obviously a big topic. State of Ohio spends about $15 billion or so on public education. We expanded total spend on public education. So this is the vanilla. Yeah. This is homemade vanilla?
Homemade, organic vanilla.
Huh, that's cool.
It's really, really good.
So one tablespoon?
1 teaspoon.
1 teaspoon of vanilla. And she was folding in the Cool Whip. So not using this, but just kind of spooning it around and
I should have probably put the vanilla in with the cream cheese.
Well, that's okay.
That's okay.
It's lots of vanilla. So with public education, what we did is we essentially, in terms of a formula, we instituted the final phase of that fair school funding formula. And on the House side, we did not. We essentially scrapped that formula, said no one's going to get a cut, everyone's going to get a little bit more. On the House version of the budget, we increased public education spending by $500 million. On the Senate side, what next?
I'm sorry, I'm just listening.
You're fine.
I'm going to spread this on.
So now what?
So we spread it all on over the cookie, and then we start layering the strawberries and then turning it into the
nice.
pie.
That's the base. So the cookie and then like the dessert kind of flavoring and topping. And that's whipped cream, that's vanilla, and that's powdered sugar. So it's really good.
Cream cheese.
And I forgot the cream cheese. So on the Senate side, they continued the fair school funding formula, where that money would go, which is usually based off of population, student size, the wealth of the area being income and property. And they increased spending by about $600 million. But that included some cuts because the fair school funding plan actually included decreases on some schools and increases on others. The House, we said no cuts. Senate said cuts, but increases. The final version increases public education spending by almost $750 million. There are some schools, especially in my district, that receive quite a bit more. That's based off of student population. That's based off of local wealth areas, the ability for the local community to chip in their kind of portion of it. And then in some areas, they receive quite a bit less. So I always joke with schools, be careful what you wish for. A lot of folks were yelling at us to implement the fair school funding plan, And we ultimately did. Now, did we fully fund it? No. So what that means is essentially the Fair School Funding Plan takes a look at all the different costs, what it costs, quote unquote, to educate a child. They look at the teacher salaries, they look at supplies, they look at expenses for the buildings, for transportation, all of that. And that kind of combines into what the cost is. Well, I always tell folks, it's kind of like a positive feedback loop. The more you spend, the more then you get reimbursed from the state, the more tax dollars goes to the system. And so we did not fully fund, quote unquote, the formula. That would have meant several $billion more of your tax dollars instead of $750 million. We've been adding roughly $1 billion to $1.5 billion every budget since 2020 into the public education system. So this plan essentially said, what were the inputs or what were the costs back in about 2022 or so, taking out all of the super inflated costs, the quite increases that we've seen over the past couple of years, and dispersed it then based on the formula. So, okay, you just spread over.
The cream cheese, the powdered sugar, vanilla, Cool Whips, all
So that's the base.
On the cookie. And then you just start forming the flag. Do you want to form it or do you want me to do it?
Oh, you can.
Keep talking.
So how do you form the flag?
So
what do you do?
There's obviously, depending on the size, I think probably 5 across and then 8 down for the flag and then, or for the stars. And then the stripes would just be
all the strawberries. And we cut these beforehand.
Yeah.
And the blueberries are there too. So you just kind of organize them all around. So that's public education. A couple other kind of big areas. So again, we increased public education by about $750 million. You're hearing right now about libraries. If you remember, we've talked a lot about the libraries. The state did not cut libraries. There is a different type of formula that we use, but there is no actual cut. Library funding was increased by about $8 million or so in this General Assembly's budget. You're seeing a lot on social media right now about libraries saying that there's a provision in the budget that said essentially if there's an age inappropriate book, the library cannot have that age inappropriate book in the children's section. It has to be in the adult section. Libraries are pushing for the governor to line item veto that. Didn't have anything to do with that provision, but I think it's a pretty straightforward one. So take a step back. The governor now has the ability to essentially, by Tuesday, July 1st, to line item veto any aspects of the budget. So if he doesn't like certain pieces of the budget, he can actually strike that out and it will not become law. That's kind of where we are with the process right now.
Is there any idea, thoughts, anything anybody's hearing that gives you an idea of what he's going to do?
Now, every governor typically line items a good number of pieces of it. Anywhere between maybe 30 to 50 different sections of the budget, for example. He's only just said that he's certainly going to line item some things. No one knows. I'll actually be with him on Tuesday. My second bill that we've passed will be signed by the governor on Tuesday, so I'll be down there for that. And Sharon asked, am I happy with the final budget? I did vote for it. There were no Democrat votes on either chamber for the final budget, only Republicans. If I remember correctly, 3 Republicans did not vote for it in the House. 1 Republican did not vote for it in the Senate. Am I happy with everything? Of course not. The joke always is that budgets are kind of a disbursement of disappointment. And that's very true with this one too, of course. Some different aspects as well, and then we'll end on the property tax pieces that were in the budget. Obviously, a big kind of focus from my local communities has been some of the marijuana money that's been happening. Several of my communities have marijuana dispensaries where the original, what we all passed, was that they would get a portion of that tax revenue. Marijuana is taxed 10%. Local communities were supposed to get a third, essentially, of that. How the budget or how the ballot initiative folks wrote that amendment, it essentially did not work. No one's been getting money. So in this budget, we said, okay, which is a House priority. Chair Stewart was tremendous on this. We said we don't have to actually give any of that money to local communities, but we should because that's what the voters had approved. So in this House passed budget, Girard, for example, is my big one. Hubbard, a couple others. That Saybrook Township, not my district, but very close to here. They will be getting their essentially third of the tax revenue coming in, which helps offset property taxes and local taxes. And that's revenue that they were expecting. I think Girard, it was $500,000 a year that they were expecting to come from the revenue sources. And that's why they accepted this dispensary. And obviously very concerned then if that money would not be coming to them. So that was in there. Obviously the Browns conversation is a big one. That one turned out differently than the House passed version. Ultimately, unclaimed funds. I encourage you to go on the Unclaimed Funds website, check it out if you'd like. I've heard from some people it's very easy to get the money. I've heard from others it's very difficult to get the money. But let's say, for example, when you go and get a debit card or you get one of those prepaid Visa cards, you don't use all of it. When your kind of account runs out, that company will actually turn over that money to the state that sits in an unclaimed fund. It could sit there for decades, actually. And in years past, the state has used that money for certain priorities or certain pieces of funding, and then essentially had it paid back. So it does not collect much interest right now in that fund because it can be essentially drawn at any time. What the Senate did is essentially say, for the Browns project, and actually they expanded it similar to how the governor proposed it originally, where money would be used for other sports facilities and community parks and projects besides the Browns. We essentially are taking out a little over, if I remember correctly, $1 billion out of the unclaimed funds, which is, there's several $1 billion in the unclaimed funds. These are the dollars that have been sitting there for over 10 years. So if, more than likely, if you've had money sitting in the unclaimed funds for over 10 years, you're not going to be claiming it. Even if you did, there's other funds there to essentially be able to draw that for you. And so we are using a portion of that unclaimed funds money for a loan. Again, it's not what we typically do in the state, which is we wrote Intel just a $600 million check, or we wrote Andrew just a $600 million check. In this case, it's a loan for the Brook Park project, the Browns project. And this will be paid back then from that project, making much more money for the state, which we'll then use for other important things that we want instead of tax dollars, which is good. So that's the Browns portion of it. And then the other piece of it will be used, I believe, for similar type projects where we'll be able to loan out and give money for community projects that are more sports related facilities, as opposed to, selling bonds, which was the House passed version of that project. So a little convoluted, but ultimately not your tax dollars. You'll never contribute to the Browns project unless you go there and you buy a ticket or you visit the village there. So I think overall a pretty good deal for us. That looks very nice. Can you see? So you can kind of see. I think that looks great. Lots of strawberries.
Some cream in between.
So you can kind of tell, depending on how you wanted to do this. Some people will put bananas where the white is. Obviously, we have that kind of white base there with the whipped cream and the cream cheese and everything. So it still looks like a flag, but the bananas are kind of another way that you can do some fruit and stuff like that. Mom's going to put some whipped cream in between. On the property tax side, we got a good amount. My most recent big bill, which we can talk about another time, House Bill 335, we got about 3/5 of that bill into the budget bill. This is the most property tax reform legislation that the legislature has passed since our current crisis 5 years ago. Obviously, I've had a lot on my Facebook page and out there about kind of what we've done in the budget bill. Ultimately, it gives voters a lot more authority. It gives locals. I talked to one county auditor this morning, and he said, "Dave, you've helped me fix the problem in my county." So with the Budget Commission and the authority the Budget Commission will have to look at tax rates, to look at budgets, what the need is, we've given full authority to essentially prevent those spikes moving forward in the counties that wish to use that authority. So you're essentially putting the whipped cream all around it.
Yeah.
Oh, that looks nice.
Decorated a little bit.
Almost like a little cake thing. Yeah, Carol, you should make this weekend. That'll be a good treat for.
Is that Aunt Carol?
No, Carol Johnson. For 4th of July. So the Budget Commission is a huge piece of this package. It's House Bill 309, which we put into the budget. For counties that will use their Budget Commission, and unfortunately that's my biggest disappointment, is that all of this is permissive in a sense. But for counties that will use their Budget Commission, this is the tool. It's a huge tool. We also looked at school funding with property taxes, and the 20 mil floor, about 200 or so schools are at the 20 mil floor, that guaranteed tax rate, and they also have extra levies that aren't counting towards that 20 mil floor. So you're paying extra when you're really not supposed to. We make everything count towards the 20 mil floor, and we're also removing the ability moving forward for local governments to levy emergency levies, substitute levies, replacement levies, and renewals with an increase. So essentially, moving forward, the only options you'll have are an additional levy, a new levy, or a renewal levy. And what that means is that the voter will clearly know this will keep my taxes the same, this will increase my taxes. So we make that very, very clear to the voters, which is important. And that will move about 200 schools off the 20 mil floor. So in their next reval, which property updates for this cycle, a third of the states in the cycle right now for January of 2026, we're seeing 30% value spikes again. So this problem is not going away, it's actually getting much worse. But in those school districts where the schools will be lifted off the 20 mil floor, that spike is very, very small, which is a big deal. It's very helpful. And that will essentially, moving forward, give the voters a lot more say. And then the last piece that we were able to get in the budget is this idea of a local homestead and owner occupancy piggyback. Right now, the state, our state tax dollars, contribute roughly $2 billion worth of subsidizing property taxes already. It's a lot of money that our state tax dollars are used to subsidize property taxes. We essentially allow for now the local counties and local entities who are currently not paying in or subsidizing these different credits, homestead, owner occupancy, we allow for them to double the savings. This would be the largest expansion of the homestead program and the owner occupancy credit in Ohio's history since we created it, if the county opts to participate in the piggyback and double that savings. Half the money will still be sent back from our state tax dollars to pay for half of the savings essentially to our local entities. The other half will be lost revenue to those local entities, but the savings will be doubled. So on average, property owners who are in homestead will save now roughly $1,000 or more dollars. Those who are in owner occupancy will save around $200. And those who are on enhanced homestead, meaning our disabled veterans, will save on average roughly $2,000. So it's a huge savings that we're encouraging counties to participate in, and this will be quite a lot of direct property tax relief to those property owners. So that was a lot there on what we did even in the budget on the property tax side, let alone just the budget side itself. But you did an awesome job.
Thank you. I don't know.
So this is a very nice, so now what do you do with it now? Obviously you don't bake it.
No, it's already been baked at sugar.
The sugar cookies base, yep.
So you just put it in the fridge to cool and kind of get
firm
together.
up?
Yeah, yeah. And then
how long will it last?
If you're having a party like today or tomorrow, you shouldn't put the fruit on until probably the day of the party, because then it kind of gets wet and soft. Soggy
with the cookie beneath, yeah. And if you put it in the fridge, though, that helps to keep it. But that looks beautiful.
It's always about the taste.
Yes.
Doesn't matter what it looks
I don't know when we're going to eat it.
Have a little bit. You can't take it to Columbus. It'll never make it.
Right. But really easy treat that you can make for July 4th. That was a quick update on the budget. I'll be releasing a lot more information over the summer in terms of specific line items. For our district, we were able to get funding, a couple $1 million actually. $2 million for the Air Force base, the reserve base in Trumbull County in my district, $500,000 for a pipeline study along Route 11 from Lake Erie down to Appalachia, Columbiana County area, which will be huge if we can get that done for development and for the sale of natural gas to Lake Erie from where it's actually drilled, which will be big. $500,000 for Mosquito Lake to help make sure that the hydrilla issue is cleaned up and is still going to be taken care of from the state. A couple other things for Trumbull and Ashtabula as well, outside of my district, but it was a very good, I think, overall budget. Was happy to vote for it. We obviously also cut the income tax. Ohio will now have a flat income tax of 2.75%, which makes us the, I think, lowest or second lowest income tax in the country. which will be very helpful to help continue attracting businesses and making us competitive. Yeah. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, so 5 years ago, you had mentioned something in your testimony.
Well, no. So the idea being a lot of the property tax stuff that we've done would not have been able to be done 5 years ago. This is the most we've done in the legislature since the crisis started. So the things that we passed, you have to take a step back and realize just how far we've gone from doing really almost nothing 5 years ago. And then now, doing some pretty impactful things across the state. All you have to know in terms of how impactful this is for our property owners to see how the entities that are receiving the property tax money are responding. Most of them are demanding the governor veto all of my provisions. And I think that shows, again, that our taxpayers, there's other ways to raise revenue to pay for these essential services that we have. There's the income tax, there's the sales tax, and there's also just the spending side, which we got to address as well. But these things that we did are big, but they're not nearly enough. We have to do a lot more. There's still a lot more I wanted to be in the budget that wasn't, that I'll be very actively working on over the summer, which will be important. And then when we get out of recess, diving in and passing some of those things too, because our property owners desperately need a lot more work than what we've done already. But what we've done, super impactful, biggest in the 5 years since the crisis, and just another step towards the big reforms we need. Yeah. So nice. Well, thank you all for tuning in. Hopefully that was, I apologize. The flat tax is phased in over 2 years. So in this budget, we have a flat tax. It'll be almost completely flat next year, or for this year's taxes payable next year, and then flat for next year's taxes payable in 2027. So a little bit of a phase in, but essentially in this budget, by the end, flat tax. Second lowest in the nation, 2.75% at the state level. So hopefully you enjoy your July 4th. And if you make this dessert, let us know. It's an easy, very simple one that everyone kind of loves. Who doesn't like a flag on July 4th? It looks beautiful, but
hopefully it tastes
I'm
good.
sure it will. We'll enjoy it real quick. But thank you for tuning in. Have a good rest of your night.
Have a good night and happy July 4th.